Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Way to Well. My name is Edie Summers, and this is a podcast and broadcast for my audience here on Substack and beyond. The Way to Well is a unique podcast in that it's going to be primarily me. I do have another podcast called The Wellness Podcast, where you can find interviews that I've done with experts in health and wellness and beyond. But this podcast is designed to be a deep dive into the world of well-being. I call it The Way to Well. I'm going to be sharing some of my work from my book, The Memory of Health and Beyond. I have several books out, and the main one is called The Memory of Health. And today we're going to be talking about finding your healthy tipping point of well-being. What does that look like? And how can that be a way that you can find your way back to well? So let's dive a little bit deeper into what finding a healthy tipping point looks like. Usually it's a combination of factors. This is what I have found works really well in terms of cultivating well-being. A little bit about my backstory. So I was someone who had a lot of energy when I was growing up. I used to run and do gymnastics and dance and horseback ride and go hiking. And I just loved to be outdoors and being really active. And I've been dancing since the age of 5. I started with tap dance and got into ballet and modern and contemporary. And when I was 22, I was a dance major at the time. I had a ski accident and I had to have arthroscopic surgery. And something happened in the course of having that surgery. I started feeling really tired all the time. I was sleeping a lot. It's a really, really long story. And I do go into the details in great detail in my book, The Memory of Health. And I'm going to read to you a little bit from that. But the reason I share my backstory is because it was a long journey for me to find what improved my energy over time. And it was a combination of factors. And I also want to say that for me, and again, it's a really long story on what my unique health and wellness challenges are, but there's something I need to take care of on a regular basis, on a daily basis. So finding a healthy tipping point is something that you can discover over time, like, again, a combination of factors that might work for you. And often, at least in my case, and I think this is true for most people who are realizing or discovering for whatever reason that they want to live a healthier lifestyle. Maybe it's because you have health issues or wellness challenges. Maybe you've been through trauma. Whatever your reason is for wanting to feel better. Maybe you have chronic fatigue too, or maybe you have some other type of chronic health challenge or health illness. I have found that it's also something that I have to do every day to show up for myself. And some days are easier than others. And, it's usually about kind of building those habits that become routines so that you can take care of yourself without having to think about it too much. But there is some intention that goes behind it as well, I have discovered. And for me, the motivating factor to show up for myself every day is because I want to feel better, because I want to continue to either have more energy or improve my energy and just feel better overall. So that's one of my motivating factors. And I also have my own unique story and unique journey back to well-being, and some of the practices and habits that I have cultivated that helped me to find a healthy tipping point. But in order for me to keep my healthy tipping point, I have to keep showing up for myself on a daily basis. So that's why I'm calling this podcast this very kind of intimate and taking a deep dive into well-being. um, I'm calling the podcast The Way to Well. And of course, your way to well might be different than my way to well. But the whole point is to start to find and piece together what really helps you find and then maintain well-being. And well-being is going to look different for everyone. But I'm assuming that you're here because you're interested in improving your health or well-being for whatever reason. Again, maybe it's due to a chronic condition, or maybe you have some current health or wellness challenge, or maybe you've been through trauma, maybe you're experiencing burnout. Burnout and chronic fatigue are on the rise in general, and so is chronic illness. So many different challenges are on the rise now because of the fact that we're living in a modern world. And I will do a deep dive in another podcast specifically for all of you on the topic of living well in this modern world. That's probably the next one that I'm going to do. But first, I want to talk about finding your healthy tipping point. So it's usually a process to kind of figure out what's going to work for you, and it's usually not just one thing that works. I have found, and also in the process of interviewing other people who have either had health challenges or wellness challenges themselves, it's usually more than one thing that helps you get that upper edge and find that healthy tipping point. So I'll share a few things that have worked for me, and I'm going to read from my book a little bit, The Memory of Health. You can see the link there for my book here on the screen. This is being recorded specifically as a podcast, but there is a video version that you can find on certain channels like YouTube as well. But for the audio version, of course, I'm going to be sharing it through Substack. I encourage you to come join me on Substack. But this is my the link for my book here that you see on the screen. It's bit.ly/book on wellness. So let's talk a little bit about how I started to find my healthy tipping point of well-being, and then what might help you. So I'm actually going to read to you just a little bit from my book, because what I have found, and this is kind of from the beginning of my book, it's kind of like a preface in a way. Really what it is, it's a summary and just a couple of pages of what I found were some of the main points that helped me and that may help you find your healthy tipping point, or that tipping point of well-being. You could think of that tipping point either in terms of health or in terms of wellness. Sometimes health can be a little more tricky, to define, like, what does it mean to really be living in a state of health? But well-being, I think, is a little bit easier for most of us to achieve. I think actually all of us can achieve it. And again, there are going to be different routes to get there. But well-being is more of an umbrella term. And it's, even if you do have health challenges, I believe you can find your way back to well-being and find your way back to well. So I have, again, kind of a short summary at the beginning of my book, The Memory of Health. I just have in a couple pages, you can see it here if you're looking at the video, The Memory of Health. Yeah, the subtitle is called A Journey to Well-Being. And I really wanted to make it a journey to well-being, because not only is it universal, everyone has a journey that they're going to take, usually several journeys in their lifetime. But everyone's journey to well-being is going to be unique and specific to them. These summaries that I put in here were also a way for someone to very quickly get a sense of what some of the topics were in the book in general. This book took me 10 years to write, and it's full of a ton of research on chronic fatigue, what might cause chronic fatigue, different theories of chronic fatigue. I also talk about self-care. I take a deep dive into that and stress management. So I was in grad school when I wrote this book. And so I learned how to do research when I was in grad school, and I came across a lot of research, not only talking about chronic fatigue, and it also helped me find those very specific topics that were relevant to my book, but also traumatic resilience. I found a lot of research around that. And so many topics are connected, just like your body is, and just like your well-being is. Well-being is usually a web. And again, that's why I like to call it that healthy tipping point of well-being. Again, you can kind of think that as a metaphor of, kind of finding your balance. But if you're thinking of it as a web, think of your body, all the different systems in your body are very much interconnected, or many of them are interconnected. And you can often start to manifest well-being by just addressing one part of your body, like let's say the nervous system. The nervous system is one of the oldest parts of your body, and it's so very much connected to so many other systems in your body, like your immune system, for instance. So if you can start to work on your stress and managing stress, that may positively impact your immune system, for instance. So that's another way to think of the metaphor of well-being. Is you could think of it either as, kind of trying to find like that balance, like a scale, finding like a dynamic balance within a scale, or you could think of it as like a web. And if one part of the web is affected, it's going to reverberate throughout the rest of the web. So just reading some of the topics that I cover in my book that may be of importance to you, especially if you have dealt with chronic fatigue or are dealing with it, or chronic illness, or if you've been through any type of major life, health, or wellness challenge, including trauma. So number one is childhood stress and chronic illness. That's a topic I take a deep dive into. Another one is white matter, microglia, and chronic inflammation. And then number three is dysregulation of the HPA axis. Number four are microbes, DNA, and your health. Number five is the feedback loops of energy in your body. And again, that kind of comes back to how your body is so many different systems in your body are interconnected. Neuroplasticity, epigenetics, and resilience. What I have found is that not only in research that points to the fact that we can become resilient even in the face of great adversity, there are really specific steps that you can take. And let me share just a couple of those right now since we're talking about it, and then I'll share more of some of the topics in my book. What I have found in research and also from my own experience is that things that would help with resilience, that could help you find that healthy tipping point of well-being, because there's usually several factors involved in resilience. One of the big ones is community and relationships. And that is one of the main indicators of well-being that can help you get back to well-being and even improve your health, that they've shown in some of the other studies as well, including one of the biggest studies I think that was done by Harvard, is connection. And there's a famous quote by John Travis that says, "Connection is the currency of well-being." But connection can really help you be more resilient. Exercise can help you, or movement. If you're dealing with chronic fatigue, you might want to think of it as just gentle movement. And there are several other things that can also help you with resilience. But resilience is a really big topic, and it's very much tied to well-being. Some of the other topics I talk about are dynamic balance. I was mentioning that earlier in terms of if you're imagining a scale. And the scale is not going to be static. It's going to be dynamic, but the goal is to keep it more or less in balance. And that's going to look different for everyone. Balance is relative, right? Like what keeps you in balance might be different than what keeps me in balance. Like for some people, being out of balance is balance. Like let's say you're like super passionate, super driven, and that's what gives you balance, is by kind of pursuing your passions. It gives you energy. That could be different than someone who, let's say, maybe needs a little more downtime, or to practice more mellow practices like yoga or qigong. So it's going to be different for everyone, but finding that dynamic balance can help you start to help you find your healthy tipping point of well-being. So in that topic, that's also connected to it, are rest, eustress, which is like positive stress, and then well-being. Becoming a conscious consumer. I don't hear a lot of people talking about this these days, but when I first started getting into the wellness space, it was in the natural foods industry. And I noticed a lot of people in the store that I was working at had health issues that were coming in, and they were looking for answers. And sometimes that's often tied together is sort of when you start to seek answers, you start to discover different worlds, whether that's organic foods or maybe really high quality supplements, or discovering yoga or qigong or tai chi, or so being a conscious consumer is a whole very deep topic, and I will do my best to remember to do a podcast specifically on that. But I do think it's very much tied often to kind of starting to wake up to that bright light of awareness of healing. Is kind of realizing that we're all interconnected. And how, again, if you think of the web of well-being, how, let's say, your well-being might affect someone else's well-being, or even the well-being of animals and the planet in general. So I found that to be a really important topic, and it's a whole podcast that I can do on its own. So I'll try to remember to do that. And then I do also talk about the cell danger response, which is kind of where your body, your mitochondria, instead of focusing on giving you energy, they're more focused on a reactive response, like an immune response, for various reasons, and that can potentially contribute to chronic fatigue. So I'm also going to read just a little bit more. Here's some of the writing from my book. Those are some of the topics that I cover in my book, some of the most important topics. But again, like I mentioned, my book took me 10 years to write. So it takes a deep dive into many subjects, including a lot of theories of chronic fatigue. So for me, these are some of the things that created a healthy tipping point for me. And again, these are still things that I need to practice as much as I can on a regular basis. And we always want to be kind and compassionate to ourselves, that we don't give ourselves a hard time if maybe here and there we're not following through as much as we want to be. But it's always helpful to remember what your reason is for wanting to feel better, because that can really be a motivating factor to bring you back to taking better care of yourself and getting back to practicing those practices, whether it's nutrition, community, connection, yoga, nature, whatever it is for you, that helps you gets you back to that tipping point of well-being. So for me, diet and supplements. This is from my book, The Memory of Health. This is some of what it healed my body: deep nutrition and a more diverse microbiome, live, organic, and unprocessed foods, and avoiding chronic stressors that were irritating stimuli to my body. High quality supplements also helped me greatly as well. And I would also say that it's also about avoiding toxins. I have a liver disorder I found in the process of developing chronic fatigue. And so, and I talk a lot about that in my book as well. And I can do a whole podcast on that about what I have found often works. And this is also, I've seen in research, is that sometimes well-being is about avoiding what you're sensitive to, and then maximizing your input of nutrition. And nutrition can be more than just food, right? It could be sunlight, it could be elements, it could be, again, connection to others. But you kind of want to bring in as much of that positive nutrition and positive energy, things that are nourishing your body, and really do your best to minimize or avoid toxins and things that are creating stress in your body. And so again, I go into great detail on this in my book, but I found to be a really important factor for me. And it's also, I believe, an important factor for a lot of people that have chronic conditions. I found in my research, it's about, I believe, it's in my book. I think it's about 40% of people, don't quote me on that, but it's roughly 40% of people who have chronic conditions don't detoxify very well, and they can be potentially, that can be part of what's making them experience symptoms. So these also help me. Back to my book, The Memory of Health. Low refined sugar, low stimulants, yoga, changing my relationship to stress, time, mindfulness, and sunshine. Did you know that vitamin D regulates about 1,000 different types of genes in the body and about 5% of the entire human genome? This is quoted. I have the full reference in my book. In the back of my book, I have all the references, but that's by Rootberg, 2015. I have a new normal, and I'm always refining and practicing my well-being. Staying well is a conscious practice for me. Memory is truly about being mindful of your life. And then I do talk about, again, becoming a conscious consumer. In the process of seeking answers to my health challenges, I became a conscious consumer, and I go. I'll do a different podcast on that, and I do talk about that a lot in my book as well. Yoga. It has helped restore my vagal tone, which is what heals and mediates your parasympathetic nervous system. This cultivates the relaxation response, Benson, 1975, where healing occurs. Most people who are exhausted are in a chronic state of fight or flight. I have found that to be very true. And there's also research behind that. When your cortisol levels are elevated, often it can start to kind of, unfortunately, train your brain to stay in fight or flight. So those pathways become stronger in your brain, and you can kind of get stuck in fight or flight. So again, I have a lot of tips in my book about how to start to heal and change that kind of get out of that fight or flight response. But that's a topic that I take a deep dive into my book. And for me, yoga helps with that. Certain supplements can help me with that, like L-theanine, lavender. There's so many different things that you can do to help your body get back more into a parasympathetic state versus a state of fight or flight. So again, let me read that again to you. This is from my book. Most people who are exhausted are in a chronic state of fight or flight. Also, figure out what your stressors are and reduce, remove, or reinterpret them. Yoga also encourages brain plasticity, I believe. Brain neuroplasticity is turning out to be a huge component of healing in general for many conditions. Stress can affect your brain, but you can literally create neural pathways that make you stronger. This is a huge breakthrough in understanding in the realms of healing, well-being, and medicine. Here are some of the other things that helped me get a healthy tipping point. Again, reading from my book, The Memory of Health. Personal connections, love, family, friends, community. Stay connected in any way you can. Nurture the threads of connection in your life. Have faith that you are interconnected with all living beings. Energy connections. Your body works on exquisite feedback loops of energy. Your job is to bring awareness to this system. This is one way to cultivate well-being. Reinterpreting stressors are key too. Body systems connections. The field of psychoneuroimmunology shows us that the psyche, brain, immune system, and possibly more systems are connected. What we do and think affects our whole body and reverberates throughout our entire being, like touching a web. Everything in our bodies and the universe is interconnected. Stress connections. Research has proven that early exposure to stress or trauma can affect the stress response in vulnerable individuals. It also points to CFS, that's chronic fatigue syndrome, as possibly being an autoimmune condition or an activated immune system, as well as being influenced by genetic polymorphisms. Microbe connections. In addition, the role microbes play in our health and even the onset or remission of chronic illness may be a major factor. Microbes are even part of our DNA. Also, the majority of our immune system is in our gut, and science has renamed the immune system the microbial interaction system. And there's a lot more that I have in these beginning pages where I kind of go into the highlights of what's in my book. I'm going to read just a little bit more to you. Here's one of the big ones that I found, and I think this one is really helpful. And this can help to remember when I was mentioning that a lot of people that have chronic fatigue are stuck in fight or flight. And that's also true for chronic illness in general. A lot of people who are experiencing chronic illness are stuck in fight or flight. And then depending on your genetic vulnerabilities, that can start to show up as symptoms depending on what your vulnerabilities are. Let's say chronic pain, chronic fatigue, and even many other symptoms and situations. So here's a big one that really helped me. I'm going to read just a little bit more to you here. And this is very much connected to finding a healthy tipping point. And remember, it's a combination of factors that work that usually get you over the edge and into a state of well-being. The relaxation response from my book, The Memory of Health. A huge factor in healing is cultivating what is known as the relaxation response. This response was discovered and researched by Herbert Benson in 1975. The relaxation response is the opposite of the stress response. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system and releases hormones and neurotransmitters such as oxytocin, endorphins, and dopamine that enable our bodies to heal. The relaxation response brings back our appetite so we can digest and absorb our food, and gives us the opportunity to harness our body's natural healing powers. By simply engaging in slow, rhythmic breathing, relaxing thoughts, relaxing movement, music that relaxes you, or anything else that helps you relax and engage in a slow, steady rhythm, you may literally harness your ability to heal. We can slow down and relax our way back into vibrant well-being and the flow of life. A definition of suffering is resisting what is. When we resist being tired, guess what persists? Instead of resisting low energy, I encourage you to put your energy into what raises your vibration, your natural vitality, and live dynamically between rest and growth. These are not simplistic solutions to potentially complex conditions. I encourage you to read the whole book for context about these hard-won insights. And ultimately, your path and your journey are your own. I encourage you not to focus too much on what caused your current condition or situation. Instead, focus on creating awareness of the delicate but powerful feedback signals and loops of energy in your body that communicate with you, and seek dynamic, blissful balance in both your mind, body, and life. When we bring awareness to the feedback loop systems in our body, we close the gap between symptoms and well-being. This is always at our fingertips through the power of awareness and mindfulness. And resilience is allowing changes in our lives to be a source of growth and healing instead of what depletes us. Stress is inevitable. Living at our growth and healing edge is a choice. This is how I reached positive recovery. We can progress instead of stress. And I want to say that this whole concept of closing the gap between symptoms and well-being using mindfulness. Mindfulness is something I talk about a great deal in my book. There's also the concept of what's called interoception, where you're able to listen to and sense your body's internal signals. And that can be a huge part of reaching the tipping point of well-being as well. It can be really useful to slow down and tune in and really allow yourself the opportunity to listen to what your body is saying to you. If your goal is to feel better, your body is full of information. It's full of wisdom. It has a voice, and it's always talking to you and asking you for what it needs in order to feel better. That might be certain foods it wants, maybe more connection, maybe sunshine, fresh air, maybe less stress. Touch, it's going to be different for everyone. And again, I'm wishing you well on your journey to well-being. If you would like to check out my book, it's called The Memory of Health, A Journey to Wellbeing. Again, the link is here on the video. I'm going to read it to you as well if you're listening to this as a podcast. You can find it through this link, bit.ly/book on wellness. Thank you so much for listening today. This has been my first episode of my sister podcast to my main podcast, which is called the Wellness Podcast, and you can find that everywhere. But this is a sister podcast that won't have interviews. I don't think, it's mostly going to be just me talking about my experience on my journey back to well-being and what might help you on your journey back to well-being. So it's called The Way to Well. Thank you so much for listening. And today we were talking about how you can find your healthy tipping point of well-being. My goal next time is to talk about how you can start to live well and thrive in this modern world. We'll take a deep dive into that next time. We'll talk more about burnout and chronic fatigue and how they're both on the rise, and what you can do to preserve your peace of mind, mental health, energy, and beyond. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. I wish you well. Have a beautiful rest of your day.